This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to our continuing series brought to you here by PlaceToBeNation.com and Place to Be Nation's main event, the 100 greatest WWE superstars of all time. I am Scott Criscuolo from Place to Be Nation's main event and the Place to Be podcast. And at main event, we have been counting down our top 100 WWE wrestlers of all time. Of course, the full 100 on PlaceToBeNation.com from you, the fan, is on the website, and we've been counting it down with ours. And we're going to continue to do that today with our Part 7. But let me bring in my co-host. He is the co-host of Place to Be Nation's main event and the co-host of the Kings of Sport and a myriad of other great things, the Godfather, Nate Milton.
What is going on, Scotty? We are back at it, back at the tabulation desk, if you will.
That's right.
Feel like election night. You know, we just had some elections recently here in Virginia, and you know, you stay up late and you wait to see the results, and sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're dismayed, but either way, it's an event, and I think that's much like our countdown here, Scott, because I'm sure by the amount of feedback you received, some of it's been positive, some of it's probably called you some colorful names, but everybody's intrigued and interested in you know, both our selections and the Place to Be Nation selections.
Absolutely, and this is Part 7. It's a 10-part series. Nate and I have been breaking down our countdown by 10, so tonight, numbers 40 to 31. Which means, Brother Nate, we are finally kind of reaching, as the great Randy Savage would say, the cream of the crop. Because we're now starting to get to the guys, and I'd said it way back in Part 1, now we're getting to the guys who are great at everything, you know, using the NJPW that we talked about. So It should be some interesting names as we finally reach this point. However, before we go any further, Brother Nate, I have to actually make, you know how like in the newspaper back in the day when newspapers were actually readable, there used to be like the little corrections, editor's note. Well, guess what? We have to make a correction, or at least I have to make a correction. On our last part 6, which was numbers 50 to 41, I had said my number 49 was Terry Funk. Guess what? That was the wrong guy. I was actually looking at the wrong...
It was Jimmy Jack Funk?
It was Jimmy Jack Funk, exactly. No. What happened was I was looking at the wrong draft that night, and that wasn't my 49. So... in the willpower department, I finally broke. I caved. I was getting pressured and pushed and prodded and poked. So I had to do it, Brother Nate. Now that I have an open slot, my number 49 is AJ Petruzzi! Because nothing fills a top 100 than another jobber, another enhancement talent that made other guys look better, damn it. No. How about that for a dusty swerve? We're going to leave number 40.
We'll say, you thought you had letters before.
I know. And they're not going to be from kayfabe, that's for sure. I'm actually going to leave 49 open. We'll see. No, I'm going to do it. I have put guys in here that have been close, so I will acquiesce Because now that we've gotten to this point, Brother Nate, it was almost like I kind of manipulated time. I'm almost like Doctor Strange. Because as we've been talking, and as we've been doing this countdown, time has continued to grow on AJ Styles' resume. So now I feel like now he's been here long enough. You like that? So yes, I will put AJ Styles number 49. So there you go. All right, good. We're done. Buried. No more.
That was skillfully handled. You know,
you like that?
Who knows? The way things are in Washington, there may be a press secretary job open in a couple weeks.
Yes. She's so hot, though. Anyway, all right. Let us move on. All right. So, Brother Nate, we all know the rules, of course. You and I go back and forth, and then we will give the exact number for what and I keep calling it the Place to Be Nation fan composite list because, as I keep saying, all 118 of your ballots were tabulated, and the official top 100 was put together. And again, it was not, by some inner sanctum or some star chamber. It was not done by the, anonymous general manager or the Black Scorpion. It was done by you, the Place to Be Nation fan, who put your top 100 list together. So, having said that, again, this is numbers 40 to 31. So, Brother Nate, I will let you go first. I'm going to try and remember this time instead of at least one turnaround. I usually blow it, but I promise I'm going to get it. I'm going to keep it flowing tonight. You are up, my brother. You're number 40.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me go first, Scott. That shows the audience what a good man you are. But starting off my list, this is no place for a good man. This is a place for a bad guy, Chico.
Okay.
My number 40, Razor Ramon, a.k.a. Scott Hall. He is number 40 on my list, four-time IC champ, and had two of the best matches in the WWF in an era when that wasn't a key thing. Match quality wasn't as big a deal back in the 90s as it is today, and you look at the two big matches with HBK. Of course, we had the ladder match at WrestleMania, but then in 96, they had that match at SummerSlam.
Right.
Which I thought was maybe not better, but in its own way, it was as good.
Right.
The chemistry those two guys had was off the charts. I thought that after Brett, you could make the argument Scott Hall was Shawn's best opponent, at least in that early era of HBK.
Absolutely. Yep.
The character is memorable, the swagger, the look. It was just Scott Hall doing his best, Tony Montana, but it worked. And I think there's something to a lot of these guys on my list tonight are going to be guys that elevated a character. The character had a certain limit, a certain ceiling, and due to the talent of the performers, they elevated it. And I think with this kind of Scarface-esque gimmick, there's a ceiling to it. And we saw that with Carlito, years later. There's no slight on Carlito, but he was only able to go so far with that gimmick. Whereas with Scott Hall, I thought he elevated it past where it probably should have been.
Right.
So I always thought the dude was a underrated performer in the ring before, unfortunately, alcohol kind of slowed him down. But in this era, particularly, when you look at 90s, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, he was just a great all-around performer. So he's going to kick off my list tonight.
Well, you and I were close to being on the same page. I had him at 44, so I had him in the last episode. So, I don't think there's any doubt that that he belongs on the list. There's no doubt whatsoever. He's arguably one of the greatest performers of all time, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And he was another great guy. You could say he was an enhanced, an upper echelon glue guy during those mid-'90s when things were a little thin elsewhere. Yeah. So, no, love your pick. Love your pick. You had him a little bit higher than I did. My number 40, we got to go back in time a little bit from you, but not that far, though. His peak during the Federation era, arguably one of the greatest heels of all time. A former World Wrestling Federation champion, a former World Wrestling Federation tag team champion, had one of the most violent, bloodiest, awesome matches in the history of Madison Square Garden. And now, he is one of the greatest follows on Twitter. And he still hates B. Brian Blair. Because he break your back! And then he'll bang your wife. My number 40, the Iron Sheik. One of the greatest workers in the Federation era. A top-notch guy. A loyal guy, because the infamous story that he was paid money or offered money by Vern Gagne to injure Hulk Hogan during their title change match in 1984. Did not do that. And I believe that story, actually. Of course, the bloody match I'm talking about is the boot camp match he had later in 84 with Sergeant Slaughter. Yep. Of course, former tag team champion with Nikolai Volkov. And just an expert worker in the ring. Cut a great promo, even half the time you didn't know what the hell he was saying, which I think added to the allure of him, to be quite honest with you. And, he was a great guy during the mid-'80s. He was in the 70s under a couple of other names, but of course his main claim to fame from 82 to, I guess, late 87, early 88. And, a guy that should be remembered as one of the best heels in the history of the business. And he came into WCW earlier in the 90s, but by then he was kind of a little bloated. And just like Scott Hall, his recreational vices caught up with him. Yep. There's a guy that should never be forgotten as one of the top heels of the Federation era and the first great foil for Hulkamania. So my number 40, the Iron Sheik.
Yeah, that's a strong pick. I have the Sheik later on in my list for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. Just a great, memorable character and a great heel. And it's funny because nowadays, post DX, post NWO, the cool heel was all the rage, and that's why I think it's kind of hard for genuine heels and baby faces to work today because of so much of the shades of gray in the 90s. But Sheiky Bay was all, wasn't a shade of gray at all. He was all black, and I mean that in the best possible way, as the mustache twirling villain to Hulk Hogan's white meat baby face. So I got no problem with Sheik on your list.
He's tremendous, absolutely tremendous. All right, the Place Me Nation fan composite number 40. I've already mentioned him. I think you did as well. He was on 109 ballots, so only 9 people did not put him on their ballot. He was as low as 100, as high as 8. And I actually just mentioned him at the tail end of our last episode. Roman Reigns.
Wow, somebody had Roman at number 8.
Yeah, how about that, huh?
Interesting.
That's kind of crazy. So there you go. So Place Me Nation's number 40, the fan composite number 40 was Roman Reigns. So all right, number 39. My number 39 is a guy you already mentioned, Nate. This guy has stood the test of time. He has handled some of his own demons. He's handled bad injuries, crossed over multiple promotions. One of the greatest all-around workers probably the last 25 years. And now he is a authority figure in one of WWE's brands, and that brand is NXT. My number 39. A spot of tea, please. William Regal. I don't think there's anything we could say that you didn't already mention on the past episode you had him. Regal is arguably one of the 5 or 6 best workers in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Nobody can argue how good he is in the ring. That great catch-as-catch-can British style. He had great matches with so many people, from Jericho to Benoit to Ray to, Edge. Just so many tremendous matches. Great tag team worker, great singles worker, great promo. He could be serious. He could be funny. There's nothing you could say about William Regal that hasn't already been said. He's obviously he's held in high esteem by the man himself, Triple H. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a job because Triple H was taken care of by Regal when Triple H was cutting his teeth as terrorizing in WCW in the early 90s. So one thing you got to say about Triple H, he is loyal to those that helped him out. So William Regal will have a job for life.
Still one of the worst names in the history of wrestling.
What, terrorizing?
Terrorizing. The only thing I loved about that name, though, was I think it was the Brain, Bobby Heenan. Again, tribute to his excellence. I think it was on one of the old Saturday nights, and Triple H came out as Terrorizing, and Brain's like, "Is that Andre's brother?" And he's like, Tony's like, "No, that's not Andre Rising. That's Terrorizing." Like, you know what? I appreciate the joke.
Yeah, I do too. And that robe was tremendous.
Yes.
Which they did bring back in the storyline with Stephanie and Jericho in 2002, which I thought was good too. Yeah, so my 39, William Regal.
Yeah, again, I talked about Regal on a previous episode, and he kind of like Sheik or like Scott Hall to a certain extent. This guy was great in the ring and on the mic, in spite of some of the personal things he was battling. But you can't dispute that this dude was a phenomenal worker and still is a very entertaining presence on WWE TV.
Absolutely. And so my number 39 is William Regal. Brother Nate, your 39.
All right. My 39 is former WWE champ, a former U.S. champ, a former IC champ, and a multiple-time tag team champ. But to me, he will always be the Lex Luger of the WWE. And what I mean by that, Scotty, is whether he's a good guy or whether he's a bad guy, just wait, because in a month or two, he'll be on the other side, so the storylines won't matter. My number 39 is The Big Show.
Absolutely, yep. Kind of knew where you were going with that.
Yeah, this is a guy who, again, has risen above a lot of the bad storytelling they've done around him. But I was a fan of this guy all the way back to his time in WCW, where he was "quote unquote" Andre's son, and was thrown off the roof of an arena.
Yep. Cobalt Hall.
He was somebody who, I think, when you look at his WWE run, he got bigger in size and in stature, I guess you could say as well. He got less mobile, but I think what was developed when he came to the Federation was we saw his personality. And he wasn't just a big monster. He was a guy that could do comedy. He was a guy that could do drama, as we saw in the storyline with the Authority. And they actually had this big dude out there crying and emoting. And so I've always been a fan of Paul White. I think that he's somebody that kind of gets taken for granted. I think, a couple years ago, people were chanting for him to retire just because, much like Kane, he's somebody who's just been a presence on TV for over a decade. And, he's kind of, you just get used to him, and it almost becomes background noise. But when we're making this list, and I'm looking at, these are the 100 guys that you can't write the story of the WWF/WWE without.
Right. And
to me, Big Show has not only been a great performer for so long, but he has been a guy that made a difference. People might forget when he came over at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, like in the heat of the Monday Night Wars. Like, that meant something for him to show up. I still remember that vividly. It's popping up in that cage match. So yeah, I had to throw Big Show some love. Plus, he was, you mentioned. Kind of just being a great tag team performer and how that's kind of often overlooked.
Yeah.
Just look at the teams Big Show's been in. You had the team with the Miz, the team with Jericho, the team with Kane. Like, he's had so many great team ups, and he's been a solid tag team guy as Taker, as well as a good singles guy. So I had to get a Big Show some love.
Oh, absolutely. No, we'll see if he's on my list. But no, I mean, here's a guy who came in. He was like the first big return that WWE got from WCW during the Monday Night War. After guys left in '96, he was the first big get in early '99. So That's a good pick. Good pick, Brother Nate. The PlaceToBeNation.com fan composite, number 39. He was on 112 ballots, so it actually stuns me that 6 people didn't have him on their list. That's ludicrous. He was as low as 94 and as high as 14. And I think we're going to see this a lot now from here on out, where some of these guys are going to be very close to either of our picks.
Yeah.
Razor Ramon / Scott Hall. So
yep.
You had him. I had him at 44. You had him at 40. And the Place to Be Nation list had him at 39. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that as we get higher up the list. Guys are going to be very close together. So, all right. Brother Nate, you're 38 as we move along.
All right. Well, this is a guy who definitely did a lot for his case with his most recent WWE run. Because, you and I talked before on a previous installment of the Countdown, Scotty, where sometimes a guy's second act can enhance their standings, but sometimes it can detract as well. And for me, this is a guy whose second run just actually, without his second run, he might have been extremely low on the list, might not have even made my list. But his second run was so good and so impactful, even though it was pretty short, that I had to put him on the list. And that is the man, Bill Goldberg.
All right. There we go. I had him a little lower up, but yeah, we got him on our list. Yep.
I mean, obviously, he's more closely identified with WCW, but for his time in the WWF, he's a heavyweight champ. He was a Universal champ, and he was not utilized to the fullest potential during his first run, but I think they made up for that on the second run when he came back and had the story of the old guy who wants to do this for his son, and went out there and just destroyed Brock Lesnar. And I guess the physical stuff in the ring didn't surprise me as much, Scott, as Goldberg being able to cut compelling promos week after week.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of finally felt that the company got the Goldberg character, but also Goldberg got what the connection with the fans, meant. And then, not that he didn't understand it before, but he didn't have to do much before because he could rely on just his physical attributes. Whereas now, he still looked like $1 million, but he's not as quick as he used to be, not as strong as he used to be. And so, you had to enhance the package with a promo and make it connect to the people. And I thought that the second run for Goldberg was everything it should have been and more. And it actually makes me want to see him again. And that's something I didn't think I would have said 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, to me, his first run probably merited him a spot on the list. Maybe in the low 90s, maybe high 80s, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. But the second run, to me, Scott, is what put him in my top 40. Because I thought that you can make the argument that Goldberg and the story about Goldberg and Brock, that might have been Brock's best run here with the Universal title.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, I think he matured, and he was a lot different than he was when he was here in 2003, 2004. All right, we both had Goldberg on our list, so I'm actually pretty happy about that. My number 38, and we use the term glue guy a lot, Brother Nate, as the kind of guy on a roster who's not particularly like the greatest of all time in anything, but he's good at everything, and he's done what is asked of him. And he could be a good face, he could be a good heel, he's a good challenger, he's a great champion. He's won pretty much everything you can win. He just concluded his perfect resume by finally becoming the United States champion. Former world champion, IC, tag. I don't think he would never won the cruiserweight, but close enough. And he is what you would call, some people say they're sick of him. I don't totally disagree, but I don't agree either, I guess, if I could be on both sides. Number 38, the ultimate glue guy, the Viper, Randy Orton.
Okay.
Randy Orton is not a terrible wrestler. Randy Orton's not a terrible promo. Randy Orton, you know what it is, Nate? Sometimes guys who never get hurt and are consistently on TV consistently, always there whenever you need him, even they get fatigued.
Yeah.
And when they don't want to be on vacation. So it's almost like it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to get hurt, but you may need to take time off TV to stay fresh. Randy Orton may just be guilty of that, because when was the last time he was out with a major injury? Probably 2008 when he broke his collarbone. Yeah. And I don't really think he had a really sustained absence since, right? No, I think he's been
other than that, the only time he's missed has been, suspensions.
Yeah.
And that the older he's gotten, the less those have occurred.
Well, no, he's definitely gotten more mature. But here's a guy who's been in a lot of major events. He's main evented WrestleMania as a face. He's main evented as a heel. He's just been an incredible worker over the last 16 years. I mean, he's been in this company 16 years now. Isn't that crazy? 16 years, Nate. That's nuts. When you actually say the number out loud, I mean, he's been here obviously as long as Cena, and you could say that like Edge, Cena, and Orton are like the triad of contemporaries, because they were kind of the glue guys in that middle 2000s when WWF was trying to kind of reestablish itself, or kind of come up with their new, shall we say, new identity, I guess is a good word. And Orton was that guy that helped do that, and I think he deserves more credit than I think he gets for what he's done for the business since 2002. He's had some maturity issues. That's evident.
Yes.
But, again, like you said, we haven't had that kind of problem since, 2006? So, yeah, he's a guy that definitely does not get nearly enough credit for being the kind of guy who has been here day in and day out, face, heel, champion, challenger, it doesn't matter. He's always there. He doesn't always have to be at the main event. He could curtain jerk. He could work in the middle. He's had feuds that you don't think about until you think about them, and then you realize how great they were. And I think the one that a lot of people talk about is the one he had with Christian for the world title on SmackDown in, what was that, 2011? 2012? When did he have that great feud with Christian?
I'm thinking 2012.
I think it was 2012, yeah. It's kind of what I'm
somewhere
thinking
around there, yeah.
So number 38 on my list is the Viper Randy Orton, and I think some people may have him higher as we move ahead.
Yeah, you can make the case. Definitely a solid pick. I think my only knock on Orton, and it's funny that it's a knock because it's criticism that some people have had about Nakamura, is I think at times, particularly the older he's gotten, he plays to the level of his competition, so to speak.
That's a good. All right, I can see that. Sure.
Where he's some guys like AJ, you could tell like they're going out there giving 110% regardless of who's in there with them.
Yep.
But with a guy like Orton, if it's a guy that he really knows that he can go out there and have a great match with, Orton's going to give you a great match. But if it's somebody that's it's just a guy, you're going to get just a match.
Right.
And it won't be a bad match, but it won't be a great match that you really remember either. And so that'd probably be my only criticism with Orton, because like you said, everything else he does really well. He may not be great at any particular thing, but your roster's definitely better if Randy Orton's on it.
Right. I agree. I could see that knock that he could, no pun intended when you said Nakamura, that if he's wrestling Christian, you'll get a great match, but if he's wrestling, I don't know, Jinder Mahal.
I was waiting to see if you were going to say it.
I had no choice. I didn't want to dig your boy Mark Henry. That's not fair to Mark Henry. Then you're going to get, So there you go. So my number 38 is Randy Orton. The Place to Be Nation 38. This guy was on 105 ballots. He was as low as 100, as high as 8. The Ultimate Warrior.
Wow.
Got some time for him, for me. So, got some time for him, for me. All right. Number 37. My 37. This is a guy we've alluded to in our discussions of other guys, Brother Nate. He is a former tag team champion from way back. He's bridged two eras in WWE. He was around in the late 70s, early 80s, and then he was around in the late 80s into the mid-90s. Great gimmick. He was a pretty good babyface, but a tremendous heel. He was one of the original, or he was probably the original Royal Rumble Iron Men. And let's just say, Brother Nate, that he was always full of arrogance. My number 37, Rick Martel.
Okay.
A guy just like Iron Sheik, and a guy just like William Regal. When you're talking about the television wrestling era, so we're going back to mid-70s, a guy that you could always count on to give you 100%, and if he's got the right opponent, he'll give you 3.5 to 4 stars. That guy is Rick Martel.
Yeah.
Rick Martel has never dogged a feud. He was a great babyface. He was a tremendous heel. My favorite, like the line we always like to use on Place Be Podcast from WrestleMania 5 when he told everyone that Tito Santana was a loser, and then of course became one of the most awesome heels in the history of the business. Very methodical worker, worked great in the ring with anybody, and again he was the original Royal Rumble Iron Man. Seemed like from like 90 to like 93, he averaged between 35 and 45 minutes in the ring, sometimes over 50. And that's because he could do it. Great promos. Was part of my PIC, Mr. Azzaro's, one of his favorite WrestleMania matches of all time, the blindfold match with Jake the Snake at WrestleMania 7. He had that crazy storyline with Shawn Michaels where they couldn't punch each other in the face. I got to see him live. I saw him live many times, but one of my favorite live moments ever, Brother Nate, the first time Raw ever came to my beloved New Haven Coliseum in September of 1993, he and Razor Ramon tied in the Battle Royal, and then I got to watch Razor win the vacant Intercontinental title from Rick Martel, and in what I remember being a tremendous match. So my number 37 is former AWA champion, eventually the model, Rick Martel.
Solid pick. That's a solid pick. Again, maybe for me, for the era that I, was kind of first introduced to the WWF programming, I will always remember the Martel Santana feud. Like that. Oh, yeah. That one always resonated, and I thought that he was the perfect foil for Tito.
Yes, no, he absolutely was, and then he followed that up with the fantastic feud with Jake, and then with Shawn, and then he had a pretty good feud with your boy Booker in WCW. I know we're only sticking WWE, but
yeah, he wasn't bad in WCW.
His age, sadly he blew his knee out, which kind of sucked for him because I think he could have gone a little longer. Surprised we haven't seen him back. He seems like a guy. I think he's in real estate in like the Montreal area, I think, or Quebec City, something like that. But he's a guy who just will always be tremendous to me when it comes to the arrogance can. He was one of the first action figures I ever owned. It was actually an AWA action figure. It was a 2-pack. You ready for this? Even AWA, even their toys look cheesy. I had this great 2-pack. It was Martel and Baron von Raschke. Who, by the way, is not on either of our lists. But it was one of my first favorite. It was one of my first wrestling figures I got was Rick Martel, or as Trongard used to call him, Ricky Martel. And then he called him that in WWF, and everybody wondered why the hell is he calling him Ricky? Well, because he was calling him Ricky 4 years earlier. So there you go, Brother Nate. So you're number 37. All
right, now I have a bit of a correction here.
You too? Because you have A.J. Petruzzi too?
Actually, I've got Bill Goldberg, who is my rightful number 37.
Ah! So A.J. Petruzzi is your 39.
So my 38 is a name, and the only reason I caught this is because you revealed the nation's pick for number 38.
Uh-huh.
And it is my pick for number 38.
Oh.
And that is the man from Parts Unknown.
All right. Okay.
The Ultimate Warrior.
The Ultimate Warrior. Okay.
So I think this is the first time the Nation and I have been in sync, which is cool.
I'm not playing in sync out of the show. I'm just letting you know.
I'm trying to set you up for the softball.
There you go.
But the thing with the Warrior is, and it's funny, like I think there's a reason why I had Warrior and Goldberg kind of grouped together, because they were very much the same guy in their early stages of their career. And I think when you look at Goldberg's second run, that's the next level. That's the evolution that we never got from Warrior, which is why I put Goldberg ahead of Warrior. Warrior was a great character. To me, one of the best WWF matches of all time, which is surprising because I'm kind of lukewarm on both of these guys, was that WrestleMania 6 match against Hogan. It's probably still one of my favorite matches from the Federation era. Because I remember as a kid, it was like, oh, wow, you got to use a cliche, the immovable object, the unstoppable, the irresistible force. So I love that match, and as much as I'm not a fan of Warrior's work rate and maybe some of his speeches later on in his career, I don't think you can make a list of top 100 WWF guys without including him. You know, he is certainly one of the most memorable characters from the late 80s, early 90s, and I think he deserves a spot on the list.
Oh, he definitely does. I will talk about Warrior later on in our series. I have him a little higher. But, no, you got to. He may not be a perfect work rate guy, but, I mean, well, I'll get more into my thing with Warrior when I get to my when he comes up on the list. So, all right,
had a surprisingly good series of matches with Rick Rude, though. I'll give him that.
Yes, he did. Well, that SummerSlam '89 match with him is arguably one of my 10 favorite matches of all time, and actually makes SummerSlam '89 one of my 10 favorite shows of all time. So, All right, Place to Be Nation's fan composite number 37. Again, it's happening again. Nate, serendipity. He was on 105 ballots, as low as 98, as high as 9. The Viper, Randy Orton. So it seems like, Brother Nate, so far, great minds think alike. All right. Brother Nate, number 36, you are up.
Yes. You know, Scott, numbers are synonymous with certain achievements and accomplishments in sports. So, you know, certain numbers just mean certain things. And this bit is not going to work if you guess the wrong thing. But we'll try it out. If I tell you the number 715 in baseball, what does that mean to you, Scott?
That is, of course, April 8th, 1974. I have the man's jersey in my closet, Mr. Hank Aaron.
If I say the number 61 in baseball, what does that mean?
Well, that is, of course, the record that Roger Maris broke in 1961, and some people say still has.
And if I say, Scott, in the sport of professional wrestling, the number 454 days, what does that mean?
Oh, boy. Does this mean, Brother Nate, that you are cool, you are cocky, and you are bad?
I think it is time to shake, rattle, and roll, if you will, brother.
Wow.
Because the next name on my list is the longest reigning IC champ of all time.
Wow.
The Honky Tonk Man.
Wow. I am flabbergasted. Wow. 36. That's interesting. Please, the floor is yours. I'm fascinated. I'm intrigued.
Now, Honky Tonk Man is not somebody who you can confuse with an AJ Styles in between the ropes.
No. No.
Just want to get that out there. But
right.
To me, and this might sound crazy, but if I'm looking at the epitome of a WWF superstar in the 80s, after Hulk Hogan and after maybe a Roddy Piper and after maybe a Randy Savage, the next name on that list I'm going to is Honky Tonk Man. I think he had the character. And again, we talked about heels wanting to be heels. Honky Tonk Man, to me, is one of the best heels in professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. I talked earlier, Scotty, about people exceeding what their characters by all given rights should be. Honky Tonk Man exceeded the limits of a character that really should have been nothing more than a mid-card jobber at best, if you think about it.
Right.
This dude's an Elvis impersonator in the 80s. Like, this is what we're doing. But Honky found a way to make it work. Like, I've seen some of the Honky Tonk Man shoot tapes, years later and things like of that nature. So I'm not sure I'm a Wayne Ferris fan, but I love the Honky Tonk Man. One of my favorite characters ever. He had the ability, regardless of who he was paired with, to make you care about the babyface because you wanted to see them put their hands on Honky Tonk Man. And I think that is a rare trait, and it's a crucial trait for any top level heel. And I think that's what Honky Tonk Man was. So I had to show him some love. I actually was surprised I actually surprised myself because going through the list, I'm like, yeah, is he a little too high? Is he a little too low? And I think no. This is for my personal list where I think he belongs. He's not one of the 25 or 30 best, greatest stars in the history of the company, but he's certainly top 50.
I don't have him on at all.
Wow.
It's funny. He was just never my cup of tea. It just never was. Look, by the way, I did have Big Show, but I had Big Show back in the 70s. We were talking before about whether I had Big Show on my list or not. I was confirming, and I had him on a previous episode, but I do have Big Show. I will say that I have more respect and more kind of admiration for Big Show, or for Honky, while Justin and I are doing our Place to Be podcast vintage refresh run of the Federation era, with his winning the IC title and the feud with Savage and the good matches they had on the MSG house shows. But other than that, I might be. If anybody gives me crap for him that I did for AJ Styles, and I'm really gonna be pissed because now you're just being pathetic. But
here's one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of professional wrestling. Honky Tonk Man got me to cheer for the Red Rooster.
That is true. Maybe
Honky Tonk got me to care about Terry Damn Taylor.
That's true. That's true. Bruce Pritchard will tell you you're an idiot, but yeah, I mean, nah, I just couldn't do it. I almost respect. Well, I always have because you're the man, brother Nate. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But that's good. I'm your evidence and persuasion is very strong, and I applaud it. I couldn't do it. He's just a guy that I could never wrap my head around. I thought it was an accident to make him IC champ. And speaking of the Ultimate Warrior, that was my favorite moment in the history of pay-per-view was SummerSlam 88 in the Garden when he went from that to laying down for the catering guy and the garbage man after that. So, all right, place to be. My number 36. One of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. Great singles guy. Had a spell in WCW, but for the most part will always be a WWF guy. This guy will probably, he and his partner, how do I word it? This guy will probably be on multiple times when we do our top 100 tag teams list. Because he was a great tag team worker with 3 different wrestlers. And he won the tag titles with 3 different guys. Former European champion, former Intercontinental champion, and sadly, he is no longer with us, even though he should be. My number 36, the British Bulldog. Always a favorite. And people are wondering, why would I have him higher than Rick Martel? Well, Bulldog's resume is a little beefier in terms of belts. And he was great as a singles guy and a tag wrestler. Of course, he was a tag team champion with Dynamite Kid, Yoko's Dynamite Kid, and Owen Hart. And I believe he had the tag belts one more time. Maybe I was thinking of Owen. No, I thought he had the tag belts 3 times. Maybe not. Maybe he only had them twice. But a former European champion, the inaugural European champion, former Intercontinental champion, Good babyface, great heel. Was a good bridge, a good glue guy, another guy into the glue guy category in the mid-90s. And he even made a spell in the Attitude Era when he came back in 99, which was pretty cool, too. It was cool to see him, even though he was having major issues at that time. And, of course, sadly, because of those issues, he is no longer with us, which really sucks.
Yeah.
But just a tremendous worker. He's one of those guys that you'll always just remember in the WWF. And he was, crossed multiple generations. Again, Federation era, New Generation era, and even a spell in the Attitude Era. So, for me, a solid guy that belongs on this list. I may have him a little too high as compared to some others, but that's fine. Some cases to each his own. But my number 36 is the British Bulldog.
That's not a bad pick. It's not a bad pick. I was always a fan of Davey Boy. I think, he was a jacked up dude, but he was pretty athletic, especially for the time period.
Mm-hmm.
He could hang with guys like Brett and Sean and Owen. And, yeah, I was always a fan of the British Bulldog and maybe his greatest accomplishment. And, hopefully we won't get letters about this, much like you got letters about AJ Styles. But I will make the argument. The British Bulldog is one of the few people of Caucasian descent that can rock sweet cornrows and not look stupid.
That is true. True.
The British Bulldog's braids were on point every single time he came to the ring.
Indeed. Yes. And he had that awesome suede vest glasses combo at SummerSlam 94 to go with those cornrows, too. All right. Place to be Nation's fan composite number 36. A guy we both like. He was on 115 ballots, which is great. That only means 3 people did not put him on their top 100, which is criminal. As low as 92, as high as 10. Now,
I like it.
I think I already mentioned him in my... Yes, he was my number 45, so I've already mentioned Goldust on my list. All right, number 35. My 35, this is a controversial one because I bounce back and forth on this guy. This is one of those picks, Nate, where I tried to stay objective because he definitely belongs on a list. Never one of my personal favorites, but a guy that needed to be respected because of what he did both in tag team and singles. He had one of the greatest moments in the history, like for a fan moment, at Armageddon in 2008 when he won his first world title. He's won the Intercontinental title, multiple-time tag team champion, and probably will be in the Hall of Fame someday. My number 35. And his brother has already been on my list. Number 35. The Enigma. Jeff Hardy. For those that know me well, and have known me a long time as a wrestling fan, the Hardys were never my cup of tea. Jeff in particular. However, I can never argue against the fact the guy knew how to entertain when his head was screwed on straight. He's another one, like Scott Hall, like Jake Roberts, like all those guys, that when his head was screwed on straight, no one could touch him in terms of being the risk taker and just electrifying a crowd. Now, he has had some utter stinkers. His match with Chris Jericho at No Way Out 2003 is just unwatchable, and then we won't get into the match we had with Sting in TNA. But that's a different beast. That doesn't count for our parameters. But there's no doubt that he can't be denied as a guy who was one of the all-time greatest in-ring daredevils in our business. Some could argue that he's kind of like a skinny Mick Foley, that he's more like a car wreck kind of thing. But I'm not going to discount that because I think sometimes that fit, particularly during the Attitude Era when everything was a car wreck.
Yeah.
So, Jeff Hardy, and is he a better wrestler than his brother? You and I had this discussion when I had Matt Hardy on my list, Nate, about kind of like solid versus spectacular or sizzle versus steak kind of thing.
Yep.
Matt Hardy is the steak, Jeff Hardy is the sizzle. And the sizzle is just enough to put him higher than his brother. But one can't live without the other, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But Jeff Hardy is a guy that will always be remembered as a guy who had a great legacy and a great career. He's still in it now, and there may still be one great solo run left in him. But even though he might be a little odd and he's, his style is not, very conservative or traditional, at the same time, you can't dispute his charisma and particularly his in-ring work. He's probably going to be the highest guy on my list that can't cut a promo to save his life.
That's the thing about Jeff Hardy, man. He's the charismatic enigma, but he is not the greatest promo. And I think the thing that necessitates Jeff Hardy being on this list is, people talk about the it factor. Jeff Hardy's got it, whatever it is.
Right.
He's a star.
Yep.
Wherever Jeff Hardy's been, he's been a star. Even, despite his personal problems, despite some of his own in-ring shortcomings, despite not being the best guy on the mic, he's very much like RVD, but if RVD were like a movie star idol.
Right.
He's RVD that older fans can respect, but he can also draw in kind of that teeny bopper crowd that RVD never connected with.
Right. No, that's good. That's a great analogy. I like that. So he was a guy that I bounced around all over my list. I had him in the 20s. I had him in the 50s. I had him in the 90s. I said, nah, he deserves to be in the top 50. So I think 35 is a good spot for him.
Jeff Hardy is a grown-ass man. How old is Jeff Hardy? Like 40, 41, 42?
Yeah.
And he's still one of the biggest pops at any WWE show is when Jeff Hardy takes off his shirt and you hear those high-pitched screams.
Exactly.
It shouldn't make sense, but Jeff Hardy just has that it factor.
He does. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Brother Nate, you're 35.
All right. I don't want to make this a political show, Scotty.
Here we go.
But I maybe it's no secret to some of the listeners out there that I'm not too fond of a lot of the people on Fox News. I do love me some Greg Gutfeld. I liked Bill Schultz when he was on Fox News. Juan Williams is always a favorite. I'm quite fond of Kimberly Guilfoyle. I think Tamron Hall's on. Tamron Hall's on Fox News now.
Yep.
So I love me some Tamron Hall. But there's one person who is on this list who is also among my list of top Fox News personalities. And that is maybe the most surprising world champion in recent memory, JBL,
Yep.
John Bradshaw Layfield.
Had him on my list. No argument out of me.
Yeah, and again, if you had told me who would be the breakout single star of the APA, even at an advanced age, I think I still might have picked Ron Simmons because we've seen him be a top guy.
Right.
Whereas with JBL, if you go back to that initial breakup and the way he looked, where he was kind of the guy from the APA, but he was rocking this new short haircut and he didn't quite look right standing next to Ron Simmons, I was not sold on him being a top singles guy. And it took him a while, to be fair. It took him a while to kind of hit his groove, but once he hit his groove, he was week in and week out one of the most entertaining things on SmackDown during his run there.
Right.
Whether you talk about the feud with Eddie or, some of the stuff with Ray, some of the stuff with, even a guy like Cena.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that JBL was a guy who was never going to give you, maybe a 5-star match in ring.
Right.
But he was always going to give you a solid 3.5, and with the right guy, maybe even a 4-star match.
Sure.
He had a good mix of power and athleticism, but what sold me was his ability, and I guess it's kind of fitting that I started talking about JBL by talking about the Fox News stuff. He was able to kind of walk up to the line on some touchy subject and make it work because he was so damn entertaining. You know, like one of the most memorable bits on SmackDown to me still is when he's at the border. And
yes. Yes.
It's a character that should have been too offensive to be entertaining, but he found the right notes to play.
Yep.
Where he was kind of this oversized stereotype of a conservative person, but you knew the character believed it himself.
Right.
Which kind of made it resonate and feel grounded. So I thought that he was really good as a singles guy. He was good as a tag guy with Ron Simmons. And he might have been one of my favorite commentators in the last 15, 20 years. Because I thought he brought the credibility from being an in-ring guy, but he also knew how to be entertaining and how to bring sort of a more sports-oriented feel to his color commentary. I was a big fan of JBL, which is something I don't think I would have imagined myself saying 15, 20 years ago.
Right. I know. I'm a little I'm pleasantly surprised, Brother Nate. I'll just leave it at that. And I like Kimberly Guilfoyle too. She's awesome. But all right. Well, I had JBL. I had him a little lower, but no, he definitely belongs on this list because one thing about JBL's title reign I loved, and when JR and I were doing our vintage vaults for that era, we had even said it by he won it, of course, at the Great American Bash in 2004, and he held it all the way till the beginning of the Cena run at WrestleMania 21. By the 2005 Rumble, you finally felt settled in, and then he ended up losing it. It was kind of sad because much as I got nothing against Cena at all, I still think JBL should have kept the title at that WrestleMania, and then they should have had Cena win it at Judgment Day in the I Quit rather than kind of win the forgotten title match in the middle because it was all about Batista and Triple H. But having said that, JBL made an incredible run, and he got a little stale with the commentating at the end, but in general, he was one of the greatest commentators. And when he came back after taking the hiatus to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, wherever the hell he did, climb to the moon, he was missed. And then when he came back, he was great. So, and he was, people forget he was the short-lived commissioner of NXT.
Yep.
He was the one who actually stripped Paige of the NXT women's title because she won the Raw women's title, or the Divas belt. And that was a tournament, I think, won by Charlotte, if I remember correctly. So, no problem with JBL. None at all. All right. Place to Be Nation's fan composite number 35. He was on 108 ballots. Actually, he was on 109 now. So 9 people didn't put him on there, and they don't get any fucking shit. He was as low as 97. He was as high as 9. Of course, I'm talking about AJ Styles. But 9 other people besides me originally didn't have him. They don't get death threats.
Do 9 other people have a podcast talking about it?
Damn it. God, why are you always right?
With great power comes great responsibility.
That's right. Brother Nate, I think you and I should be on Red Eye with Gutfeld. I think we can take that show to the top, damn it.
I used to love Red Eye. I used to love me some Red Eye.
I did too. I love Gutfeld. All right. Brother Nate, up to your turn, my friend, with 34.
All right. Now, we just talked about JBL and kind of the character that pushed boundaries, and I think, some people could have looked at that heel run and said it was a bit trashy. But we're about to go, Scotty, from trashy to classy. Because the next name on my list is Classy, Freddie Blassie.
Wow!
Yes.
34?
A bit of a throwback here.
Wow!
I have, again, somebody like, I don't want to say he's like Honky Tonk Man, but he's kind of Honky Tonk-ish for me. And obviously I didn't get to see a lot of Freddie Blassie in his prime. Actually, I didn't get to see pretty much any of Freddie Blassie in his prime. It's all from going back and watching stuff on the network and watching stuff on YouTube. And I have grown to really appreciate the work of Freddie Blassie. You talk about the WWF run where he came in and had good feuds with Bobo Brazil and Bruno Sammartino. And this will go on to have a pretty decent feud with Pedro Morales, who we both mentioned on this list before.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that he was a bit ahead of his time in terms of his heel persona, and it just worked. Like, coming into the company with a fake belt and saying that you're the champ, like, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I think, it's because the in-ring is not what in-ring is now, and maybe the presentation is not what presentation is now. We kind of forget how kind of cool some of these things were when they were first introduced. And so, like, having this dude come in talking all this smack with this belt that nobody's ever heard of, saying he's a world champion. I thought that was a really cool gimmick. And, Freddie Blassie's not to jump on the honky tonk bandwagon again, but he's not going to be confused with AJ Styles in the ring. But I thought he was good enough to complement his mic work and his character work, which I thought were really great. Obviously, most of our listeners will probably remember him more as either the manager later on in his WWF run, or as the, I don't know, would you call him like mascot or the moral center of the company that they'd always kind of wheel out literally?
Yes.
When they
motivational
had a big
speaker.
Moment. Yeah, the motivational speaker. Particularly like in the Invasion, when the company was fighting for its soul against WCW and ECW, and Freddie Blassie's the guy that roused up the WWF troops. And for a long time, he was the guy that did the pay-per-view intros.
Yes.
They'd have him sitting up in the empty arena, and then he's just talking about all the greats and why this particular pay-per-view is a continuation of that. To me, Freddie Blassie's the guy that probably won't make everybody's list, but just kind of going back and looking at some of the work that he did, I thought he deserved some recognition, so I had to give Classy a spot on my list.
Wow, that's unique. I did not have Freddie Blassie on my list, but he is arguably one of the greatest managers of all time, and a guy that should not be forgotten in the annals, particularly in this company. And I mean, I'm watching these All-Star Wrestlings from the late 70s, and he managed, he actually led the, at the time, real shocking heel turn of High Chief Peter Maivia. Mm-hmm. So he's a guy that shan't be forgotten in the annals of this company. So I got no issue with that. No issue with that, Brother Nate. My number 34 is a lot like my 35. He's a guy who historically will always be known as a tremendous tag team wrestler. But he did have a good singles run. He was I guess you could say he was a glue guy in the mid-card throughout the Attitude Era and beyond. Finally got his main event spot in, 08, 09, and 10 as a former ECW heavyweight champion, and finally winning the World Heavyweight Championship. And even though I hate the candy that it's named after, I have no problem being a peep. My number 34 is Christian. Some will argue, and I remember Dr. G and I have had this discussion, and a couple other people I've talked to. Some will argue, Brother Nate, and I'm not sure your thoughts on this, that Christian, move for move, is actually a better wrestler than Edge. I don't totally agree with that, but Christian clearly came into his own in 01. The great storyline with he was kind of like Owen to Edge's Bulldog, and ended up becoming, over the next 10 years, a fantastic wrestler. And he was one of the first ones. I have to say this, Brother Nate. He was one of the first ones and then others would do it afterwards, and a couple are doing it now, where they realized, you know what, I have to be missed for them to want me back. And then he left in, I guess it was '05, went to TNA, became a NWA World Champion for a couple of years, then came back in '08 and was started fresh, and was the ECW champion, and then finally ended up winning the World Heavyweight title. And as I mentioned earlier, had a fantastic feud with Randy Orton. He's just one of those great guys, one of those great workers, great promo, great backstage stuff with Jericho, with Edge. He's just one of those guys that wherever you put him, he shined. And even though he may not get all the credit he deserves, because he was like I don't want to say the Marty to Edge's Shawn, because that's because Christian is no Marty. But my point is, he was the one that most people forgot about.
Yeah.
Until he broke out on his own, everyone realized, wow, this guy's pretty damn awesome.
He's the Matt to Edge's Jeff.
Yeah. That's an even better comparison, because I like both Matt and Jeff. So there you go. I mean, this is a guy, Brother Nate, that wherever you slotted him in the mid-card, main event, anywhere in his WWE career, he shined, and he belongs on the list.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's really separated Edge from Christian is, and I mentioned it when I talked about Edge before on our countdown, is Christian never had that defining moment that gave him that push like Edge did with the Matt Hardy Lita stuff. And without that, I think if Edge didn't have that, Edge would have had a career probably a lot more similar to Christian's. Whereas this is a guy that's really good, but he's not top of the top. He's not at the summit. But he's pretty high up the mountain. And in terms of who's the better wrestler, I think it's pretty close, because even if you look at some of the stuff Christian did in TNA against, for lack of better terms, lesser competition than Edge got to work with in WWE, Christian still had some really good matches. And he got some good matches out of Abyss, which, not to throw shade at Abyss, like Abyss isn't, continue my theme of the night, Abyss is no AJ Styles in the ring. And Christian got some good matches out of Abyss. So, yeah, I've always been a fan of Christian. He's probably always going to be overshadowed, much like Matt is overshadowed by Jeff. But, yeah, he definitely, to me, deserves a spot on the top 100.
All right. Well, Place to Be Nation's fan composite list agrees with me. On 112 ballots, as low as 95 and as high as 8.
Wow. Also
at number 34, Christian. So how about that for serendipity? Wow, somebody had him at 8.
That is surprising.
Somebody had him at 8. Wow. Okay, interesting. All right, number 33. My 33, another stalwart of the Federation era, former Intercontinental Champion, former Tag Team Champion, had one of my first favorite matches as a kid. Cage match. He could be what you would call a Vince glue guy in the 80s until he left in, 93? I think he stuck around, maybe leaving early 94. But he will not be forgotten. And he was the first singles WrestleMania win for Shawn Michaels. And I had his renowned tag team partner earlier on in this program. My number 33. Jesse used to call him Chico. I will call him by his correct name, Tito Santana. Always a big Tito guy, always. And he's, again, a glue guy from the Federation era that you could always count on to do whatever is asked of him. And one of my first favorite matches, Brother Nate, was July 6th, 1985, from Baltimore, Maryland. Right near you, by the way. Where Tito got back his Intercontinental title from Greg the Hammer Valentine in a fantastic cage match. And he was just always that damn good. And, yeah, he was just a tremendous worker. Tag team champion. Had a great feud with Magnificent Morocco. As mentioned, had a great feud with Valentine. Great feud with... Actually, a pretty good feud. He had a pretty good random Ron Bass match at MSG in '87. And, of course, that led to his great feud with Ricky Martel, and etc. And then, of course, he became El Matador and put over Shawn Michaels for Shawn's first WrestleMania singles win at WrestleMania 8. So, again, another guy that you remember as a kid. One of those company guys that Vince could always rely on in any capacity for whatever you needed him for, and he deserves a spot on the list. And in the top 40 for me.
That's a solid pick. I've always been a fan of El Matador.
I think you would look good in that outfit, though.
I mean, I love the color scheme.
I think you would. I thought you would. Yeah.
Tito is definitely a guy, particularly when you look at kind of the tail end of the rock and wrestling era.
Yep.
Who was always a mainstay on WWE or WWF at the time programming. So yeah, again, going back to that feud with Rick Martel, one of my favorite feuds from that time period. So I got no problem with Tito.
All right, floor is yours. You're number 33.
All right, Scotty, you and I have both worked in the TV industry.
Mm-hmm.
And as a shout out to our neighbors to the north, there's a thing called CanCon, and that's you have to have a certain amount of Canadian content in your programming in Canada. And I looked at my list and I realized that I didn't have any Canadians on it, so it's time for a little CanCon, Scotty.
Aha.
Because the next man on my list, much like Freddie Blassie, is more of an old school nostalgia pick. He is a Canadian wrestler. He is a former IC champ, a former North American heavyweight champ. But maybe his greatest claim to fame is as the father of one of the greatest gimmick matches in WWF history.
Aha.
And that, of course, is none other than Pat Patterson.
Pat Patterson. Well, as we all know,
Patterson.
We all know what number I had him at. We're not going to get into that joke again. So, no, I can't argue about Patrick.
Yeah, I echo many of the sentiments you had about Patterson and that. Obviously, one of the highlights of his career was the street fight with Slaughter, which listeners, if you're going to go out of your way to watch one Patterson match, that'd probably be the match I choose. Because I thought both guys looked really good in that match. But when you talk about the Royal Rumble, and I think I might be giving him this spot maybe more due to that than his in-ring, even though in-ring was good. His in-ring certainly would merit a place in the top 100. But I think the reason he's this high for me is because of what the Rumble has meant to the company.
Mm-hmm.
And what he has meant to the Rumble.
Yep.
Because we've seen Royal Rumbles that have not had Patterson's kind of genius imprinted on it. And they have not been as good. They have not been as coherent as the matches where Pat Patterson's been the guiding force behind them. So, again, one of the classic wrestlers from yesteryear. Do yourself a favor and check out the Street Fight with Sergeant Slaughter.
Yep.
And anytime you enjoy a Royal Rumble match, just give a bit of a toast to Pat Patterson, because if not for him, we might not have this match.
Oh, I don't think we do. I don't think anybody else at the time was able to think outside the box on it. No, well, Pat's on my list, so I echo all your opinions. He is
not for Patterson. We might be watching Vince Russo reverse Royal Rumble matches, and that would be our Royal Rumble.
Everybody's got to get into the ring.
Listen, bro. The object of the match is the last man to get into the ring wins.
That is dumb. That's why he. That's why he is where he is. No argument out of me. No argument out of me for Pat on that one. No doubt. All right, the Place to Be Nation fan composite number 33. He was on 109 ballots, as low as 94, as high as 10. And you just mentioned him. Sergeant Slaughter.
I like it.
I love it. More on that in a little bit. Brother Nate, you are up with your number 32, who, by the way, I am wearing a number 32 right now. And that is five-time NBA champion, Mr. Irvin Dickinson. So there you go. I'm wearing a 32 right now. So set you up nicely.
All right, so my number 32 is a man that I believe you've had on your list, Scotty. And the thing is, so many of the people that we've talked about on our countdown are members of either the WWE Hall of Fame or the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame or even the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. But the gentleman that I'm going to talk about next is not only a WWE Hall of Famer, but he is the curator and the owner of the Hall of Pain. Mark Henry.
I got no debate with that whatsoever.
Yes, I had to give some love to Sexual Chocolate. And one of the things we talked about on this episode, Scotty, is guys overcoming gimmicks that shouldn't work. And I don't think in recent memory we've seen a guy overcome more crap that the writers have thrown at him than Mark Henry. Whether you talk about, the Mae Young hand thing or the cloudy transvestite thing.
Oh, God. You're going to paint us. Ridiculous.
Like, Mark Henry, by all rights, should have had a 5-year career at most in the WWE because of the garbage they gave him, in that early run. And, combine that with the fact that he really wasn't that good in the ring for that early part of his career.
Right.
But around 2010, 2011, something happened with Mark Henry, and the switch just went off. And you got a guy that was not just good in the ring, but was cutting some of the most entertaining promos on SmackDown at the time. This is a guy that was, talking about people in the Hall of Pain, and you had the great theme song by 3-6 Mafia that still, to me, to this day, is, I think, one of the best WWE theme songs of the, last generation.
Yep.
And I think when you look at some of the matches that Mark Henry had with guys like Undertaker, some of the matches that Mark Henry's had with guys like a John Cena, some of the matches that Mark Henry has had over this last run, I think that, to me, cements his place on the list, because this is a guy who could have very easily fallen into the trap of being a tag team guy or being just a big guy. He could have been Mabel with a little bit more athleticism. But, and that's not to throw shade at King Mabel, but, he had a certain role on the show. Mark Henry transcended the role that he could have been pigeonholed into and became a fully rounded character. And, you talk about that salmon jacket promo, still to me one of the best moments in recent memory in the WWE. So I have to carve out a little space in our top 100. We've had a lot of glue guys on this list, and you can say glue guys. Glue guys might be a little bit vanilla at times, so I figured it was time to throw some Sexual Chocolate on this list, Scott.
Well, I had him on my list too. I had him at 89, and here was a guy who again, could have been just a talentless hack and a terrible, an afterthought. But he righted the ship, used his size to his advantage, ended up carving out a pretty damn good career for himself.
Yeah.
So no argument on that one, Brother Nate, as you know, because I had him on as well.
Like, it's funny because I think when he first signed that 10-year contract, I don't think many of us, Scott, thought that he would not only meet that but exceed that.
Right.
And he did, and I think it's because he was guy like he could have rested on the money and rested on just how big he was and how strong he was, but he actually worked and got better and became a fully rounded professional wrestler, and I got him credit for that.
Yep, he absolutely did, and now he is in the Hall of Fame. So congrats to Mark Henry for being in the Hall of Fame, but more importantly, being on both our lists, because that's more important than the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
All right. My number 32 also started off with a lousy gimmick, but he, of course, he was part of that fantastic OVW class between 2000 and 2002. And ended up carving himself a great career. Former World Heavyweight Champion, former Tag Team Champion. His return a few years ago did not go the way he thought it would. But that's okay. Because he went from being an animal to a guardian. My number 32 is Batista.
Yes.
And we won't say anything more about Drek because we want to keep this spoiler free because we don't know when you'll be listening to this if you have seen the movie already, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, I was a Batista mark the minute he walked on the screen because he was one of those guys, Brother Nate, that he walked out and he just exuded star. He was one of those. And even though he was, Deacon Devon's, Reverend Devon's box collector or a collections man, he did what any right person would do to enhance your career. You connect yourself to Ric Flair. And then, because if you have the opportunity to, you don't say no, or you'll go back to pumping gas. He did that, and he became one of the greatest of all time. Probably future Hall of Famer. Of course, he'll always be known for his trilogy of great matches with Triple H that got actually progressively better. The one at WrestleMania was the one at Backlash was all right. And then the Cell match at Vengeance is arguably one of my favorites of all time. And I will beat the drum from here till the end of time for his multi-match feud with The Undertaker in 2007.
Yeah.
I love the match at WrestleMania 23. Why? Because they didn't think they would get one that good. They actually wrestled their anger out there because they thought that they should have been the main event. Why is John Cena and Shawn Michaels so damn special? And they went out and they put on a match they probably had no business putting on. And that's what I love about Batista. He took himself very seriously in the sense that he wanted to be a tremendous worker. He wanted to be more than just, the big dude with the great muscles and everything. He wanted to be a stud worker. And he did the best he could to do that. He came back in 2014, and of course, things didn't go exactly as he thought. But you know what? What are you going to do? It's got a pretty
anybody would have failed in that spot.
Exactly. He can't be blamed for that specifically because of him. He was collateral damage for the groundswell of Daniel Bryan. So, but I actually watched and enjoyed his collection on the network. He did get punked up by Booker T, and he probably deserved it. But guys make mistakes. So look at two Evolution members.
It probably helped him out because he by all accounts he's like a respectable and just salt of the earth dude now. So that ass whooping probably helped him out.
It probably did. No, you're absolutely right. It probably did. So there's my number 32, the animal Batista, who gets just a notch above Randy Orton, because you could obviously both Evolution guys, but I put Batista a little bit higher. The Place to Be Nation fan composite number 32 is a guy we've already talked about tonight. See, like I said, Brother Nate, once we were going to get to this part of the countdown, a lot of guys were going to match up, because because we're at that point now. He was on 112 ballots, so 6 people did not put him on. He was as low as 99, as high as 13. Jeff Hardy.
Yeah.
So, about the same spot. Yep. Okay. All right. My number 31, my final pick of the show. Well, we already talked about his tag team partner tonight. Or one of his tag team partners. Actually, his most common tag team partner. I thought I was going to have him higher because I'm that big a fan of his. But I realized there were 30 guys better than him. But that does not take away the fact he's arguably one of my favorite workers of all time. And I always called him a hybrid. He wasn't a guy you could identify as one type of wrestler or another. But to add a little more Canadian flavor to this evening's program. But, kids, you can keep watching and keep listening, I should say, to our podcast, even though I just made it rated R. And number 31 is Edge. It was hard to find a spot for him in the top 30 because my top 30 is just jacked. But, look, he was a tremendous heel and a great main eventer at a time when the company was still trying to kind of find itself out of the Attitude Era. Another heel that made John Cena, and John Cena should be thanking all these heels because there was a lot of them that made him.
Yep.
And I always said this. I've said this on Place to Be podcast with JR about, during his, different podcast or pay-per-view matches. I always called him a hybrid guy. He was a guy that was good at a lot of things and added a little bit of each to his repertoire. He was a high flyer. He was a technical wrestler. He actually was a power guy. He used a lot of power strikes, kind of like a Batista, which is funny. But he was a guy that took a little bit of everything and made it his own. And got himself involved in a lot of controversy, the whole thing with with Matt Hardy and Lita, and cashed in twice Money in the Bank, had probably one of his greatest moments of his career in 2006. Had some stinkers. In fact, a guy I just mentioned, he and Batista never had the best chemistry. But that's okay. Edge just did the best he could to put over what he needed to put over. He had his little posse, La Familia. And it's not a secret that I was legitimately sad that night after WrestleMania 27 when he retired. It legitimately made me sad. Broke my heart because he had another 8 years more to keep going. And it killed me that he had to retire at that point. But he's now in the Hall of Fame, and he deserves it. So I actually have...
And he's married to Beth Phoenix. So,
exactly. He's married
there
to...
are worse lots in life.
Exactly. He's married to a glamazon. And so actually we were talking about our next big list, Brother Nate, which we'll count down, of course, next year, and that is our top 100 tag teams. And I tonight mentioned a tag team that's probably in my top 5, if you ask me now. Because I had Christian a few slots ago. So my number 31, the rated R superstar, Edge.
Yeah, it's a good pick. Edge is, to me, if the top 100 is a roster, I think, the top 25 guys, that's your main eventers. And then, 26 to 50, those are your upper mid-carders. And I think that's where Edge is. In the grand scheme of history, he's an upper mid-carder. Like, he's not at the top, but he was a damn good guy, damn good worker.
Yep. I agree. All right, Brother Nate, you're number 31.
All right, my number 31, and don't get startled, Scotty. Don't get alarmed. He's actually been in the room with you this whole time. He's just been moving really slowly, so he's invisible. And that's a joke that people that have seen Infinity War get. And if you haven't, what are you doing with your life? Go see it after you finish listening to this podcast. But my number 31 is Drax himself. Dave Bautista.
Wow, so pretty close, you and I.
Yes.
Pretty close, you and I. Good. I like the serendipity.
Bautista is a guy, he very much like Mark Henry, who could have gotten by on just being a big dude, who was pretty damn green when he first came in, and who could have just kind of coasted on being a big, jacked up dude, the kind of guy that Vince McMahon likes. You know, he could have easily been another Heidenreich, or been another Snitsky, or been another Baron Corbin. I didn't mean to say that. That slipped out. But he worked, and he worked hard, and he became a damn good wrestler for his size, and maybe an even better promo than a wrestler. Batista is a guy that I thought went out there, and you know, you made the comparison to Randy Orton, and I will say the one difference to me from Batista to Orton is while I think Orton overall is a better wrestler in ring, I don't think Batista ever had that issue with like that Orton does, where he kind of falls to the level of his competition. I thought Dave went out there and worked hard every time out there. You know, he always had the best match, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I thought his matches with Undertaker were good. His matches with Triple H were good. I even thought he had good matches with Booker T. And then, of course, the series with Rey Mysterio. You're supposed to be my friend, which was not his best acting. I'm glad that wasn't the demo reel he sent to Marvel. But I was like you. I was always a fan of Big Dave. I thought he had a good look. I thought he had a good entrance. The Evolution stuff was good. I'm just a fan of Dave Bautista. And I thought the character that he had when he came back for his most recent run, where he was kind of the Hollywood Rock version of Batista, I thought that was a really cool character that I don't think people appreciated because they were just mad that he wasn't Daniel Bryan. But he was doing some really cool character work. I'm a fan of Dave Bautista. Like I almost wish I could rank him higher, but I think realistically this is probably as high as I could rank him and still, you know, have my list have kind of some sort of internal logic.
Well, logic states that the Place to Be Nation fan composite continues to be serendipitous with the main event, because their number 31 was also Batista. Not the first time that's happened this evening. He was on 112 ballots. He was as low as 98 and as high as 11.
Wow.
So somebody had him 11. Very interesting. So again, as I said, Brother Nate, at the beginning of the show of this episode, we're going to start, now that we're getting really, really into the cream, we're going to have this happen a lot, where my pick, your pick, and the Place to Be Nation fan composite pick. Which, by the way, I know if you're listening to this series in order, you know that our ballots are in here too. The law of averages are very close, because now we're at that point in the list. So, all right. Let's do our quick recap of our top, or of yours and my 10. My 40 to 31: Iron Sheik, William Regal, Randy Orton, Rick Martel, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, Jeff Hardy, Christian, Tito Santana, Batista, and Edge.
And I had Scott Hall, a.k.a. Razor Ramon, The Big Show, The Ultimate Warrior, Bill Goldberg, Honky Tonk Man, JBL, Classy Fred Blassie, Pat Patterson, Sexual Chocolate Mark Henry, and of course, the guardian of our countdown tonight, Dave Bautista.
He is the guardian of our countdown, yes. Oh my God, over there, very slowly eating something.
Yeah, I might have to go watch Infinity War again once we get through.
Oh, it's fantastic. I saw it the other night. It's tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. That'll wrap up part 7 of our 10-part series. Join us again. It will be up soon. And 70 down and 30 to go. And again, listen to our regular show, Brother Nate's and my regular show, Place to Be Nation's Main Event, where we always talk modern day wrestling. And we're happy you joined us. So for Brother Nate, I'm Scott. 70 down. The cream continues to rise. Who will be in the top 30?
Seems so long.